muted.
Good morning, everybody. This is Jeff Spring of the Department of Commerce, and you've joined the June edition of the CHG Lead Grantee Network Call. Thanks for joining us. This series of webinars that's held the third Thursday of every month is a venue for CHG Lead Grantees to kind of have a peer-to-peer sharing experience to work on and discuss the various topics that are kind of current at any given point in time today. For today's network call, we've got two guests. We've got Bob Story from the Department of Corrections and my colleague Carrie Retlin with the Department of Commerce. Bob is going to go on first. He's going to be talking about an interesting program they have called the Earned Release Date Housing Voucher Program. I'm going to let Bob actually do the explaining. So Bob, I'm going to make you the presenter and unmute you, and you should be good to go. So yes, you click on show my screen.
Yes.
There we go. We can see your screen now.
Awesome.
Take it away, Bob. So you've got about 15 or 20 minutes, and then we'll do questions and answers afterwards.
Well, thank you. Good morning, all. Again, my name is Bob Story. I am the administrator for the housing program with the Department of Corrections, and I manage the ERD housing voucher program. We use a lot of acronyms in our departments, and so I first want to explain what the ERD stands for. It's the earned release date, and maybe the best way to explain that would be to give a hypothetical situation right at the onset. If you were sentenced by a judge to prison for, let's just say, 5 years, that would be your max prison date. That means at 5 years, by law, you have to be released. However, while in prison, individuals, they earn time off of that max prison sentence. Maybe they're programming, they get time off for good behavior, participation in treatment programs. It could be a myriad of things. And even by law, time is taken away. So what that does is that creates a new release date, which we would call the earned release date. So back to our hypothetical, if you were sentenced to 5 years, let's just say you earned 2 years off of that. So instead of 5 years in prison, you're now looking at 3. However, you cannot take advantage of that earned release date unless you have a viable release address. And a lot of the folks in prison, they do not. Maybe they've burned bridges in the community, they have no resources to pay rent. It could be a myriad of things. And so what's happened is that individuals who have earned their time, earned release time from their max sentence, cannot take advantage of it, and they will sit in prison all the way up to that max release date. Obviously, that is expensive. On average, it costs about $100 a day to keep somebody in prison. So we're looking at about basically $3,000 a month. And so that's a big chunk of money. Back in 2009, the Department of Corrections created the Earned Release Date Housing Voucher Program for the purpose of saving taxpayer money and also to reduce prison overcrowding. And so this program is created for individuals who could not support their own release plan, for those individuals who would remain in prison after their earned release date without assistance, and those who would also be on active DOC supervision upon release. And there's some other criteria with regards to compliance in programs, and there's behavioral issues as well. So there's a myriad of criteria that we look at to determine those who meet the qualifications for the program. From a cost-saving measure, instead of paying $3,000 a month to keep somebody in prison, we will pay a vendor up to $500 a month to house our offenders once they're released from prison. So just the math alone, you can see there's a huge, huge cost savings, $3,000 versus $500. And so again, we pay up to 3 months. It's not 3 months is not guaranteed, but there's a requirement to maintain compliance within while they're in the community in order to participate in the program. We have probably over 500 housing vendors within the state of Washington who are willing to provide housing for those coming out of prison. And vendors come in all shapes and sizes, from apartment complexes and motels to mom and dad who just have a spare bedroom and from a humanitarian standpoint really want to help out. So again, they come in all shapes and sizes. And again, we have about 500 of those. We don't go into any kind of contract with these vendors. The program just pays a vendor on behalf of an offender. Any rental agreements, any contracts are specifically between the offender and the vendor. And again, we're just in essence somewhat like Big Brother, who are just paying on behalf of the offender. Probably our biggest struggle we have is the housing of the certain populations that, for lack of a better description, have been demonized in our communities, and be more specific, our sex offender population. We're always on the hunt for new vendors, specifically those who will house that population. Now, recently, I was in contact with your department and had a meeting with Jeff, and we discussed about how could we address the issue of homelessness. Again, our vouchers, they run out in 3 months. That's the max we can pay. Now, I'll tell you, there is a large percentage of offenders who are in this transitional housing and want to stay where they are. And so if an offender can pay rent when our benefits cease, then absolutely they can continue in that housing environment. If not, then they can move on. Unfortunately, sometimes they move on into homelessness, and that is unfortunate. So there was a discussion with regards to how could we use Department of Commerce resources to potentially piggyback what we do to mitigate some of the homelessness. And so we're kind of in an exploratory mode, I guess, for lack of better description, which is what's kind of prompted me to give a presentation. So I hope I've explained the program well enough, and just looking through here my fact sheet here. It is said basically 96% of offenders will be releasing from our DOC facilities, which is it's a huge number. 4% will not, either because they are sentenced to life, or they'll be civilly committed because they're just so dangerous to either themselves or to others. So with that said, I've never worked in this type of a program before here with regards to this webinar, and so I don't know if I can address some questions or how this specifically works.
Oh, Bob, so we have some questions from some of the attendees on the webinar. And let me say to the audience first that this is the beginning of a conversation we hope continues and evolves over time, certainly not the end of it. A big concern about commerce that Commerce has is in getting those offenders, and I think you actually touched the nail on the head when you talked about those former offenders whose about 3 months worth of vouchers have expired, and they have to then move on. That's the important part, that we want to make sure we can get connection between those offenders and the coordinated entry system in each community. And whether that involves getting DOC staff, Department of Corrections staff involved in that or not, I'm not sure. I would imagine probably that would be helpful. But did you have something you wanted to say about that?
Yeah, and that's going to require some coordination with DOC staff, and because timing appears to be somewhat of an issue, and I know, based on just my brief discussions with your staff, in that an offender has to be on the verge of homelessness. And basically the way our system works is that we have again, let's say offender Jones, who is on his second month, and he will get his third. If we know that offender Jones will not be able to continue in that house, has not found employment or has not found the funds to continue in that house, and we can anticipate that he's leaving, we are already working with prison staff to try to get another person out of prison to fill that bed. And so it can be somewhat, I can see where, because vendors, I mean, this is how they make their money. And when they have vacant beds, that becomes an issue for them. And so there has to be a process, almost a seamless process, where these offenders who are not going to be able to continue with rent, that they're identified and put into the coordinated entry system to get the funding in place before we have a vacant bed. And so
right.
that's going to be the issue.
And that is the issue. That's the important part of connection or integration with the community's homeless coordinated entry system. Mm-hmm. For our coordinated entry systems, these clients would be approaching as homeless prevention clients, and these are the clients that we hope would screen in through your targeted prevention screening mechanisms, because we know that this population has a greater than average likelihood of falling back into homelessness given their past. So as I said, this conversation is just getting started, and I know that Commerce will be working with its grantees to figure out how to facilitate this and make it more seamless. Let me pass along a couple of questions to you, Bob. Mike in Whatcom County says units in Whatcom County for studios run between $600 and $700. Can that $500 per month be increased? I think you told me that $500 is written in statute. Is that true?
So the $500 is written in statute, but let me clarify something here, because this is really important, and that is that the $500 is per bed.
Okay.
And so there's somewhat of a distinction there. And so again, let me do a hypothetical. And again, I know you folks tend to pay per fair market value. I'm guessing that's based on a room. That's my assumption. Okay. So I'm paying per bed. So if you have a studio apartment and the bedroom is large enough to put in 2 beds, well, now I'm paying $1,000 a month.
Got it. So it's kind of like pairing someone up, an offender with a roommate, or maybe a couple of
Absolutely. The vast majority. Matter of fact, I could probably say 98% of our housing is group housing. Right. And so I do see on occasions where the bedrooms are so small that, yeah, only one person can go in there. But oftentimes we deal where There are multiple individuals in a bedroom. And so this is where it becomes somewhat lucrative for a vendor. And that, okay, so it's a different standard. So I'm paying $500 per bed, not room.
Got it. Okay. Mike also asks if that 3 months worth of assistance is hard-coded into the law, and I think you told me that the law also prescribes that DOC cannot pay more than 3 months. Is that also correct?
That is correct. The RCW 9.94A -729 makes that very clear. So, but there are other funding sources as well outside of my program. Each field administrator who represents an area in the state, they have some transition funds as well. They're very guarded, absolutely guarded, but there are occasions where there are some mitigating or aggravating circumstances where maybe due to community safety, it's absolutely essential we know where this person is laying their head. And so in those cases where our 3 months have expired, we may reach out to a field administrator to tap into their fund. Again, then that's limited as well. But we have done that in the past. But the 3 months definitely, it's locked in, no more than 3 months. And so let me just clarify that really quick too. So in the initial hypothetical that I gave you, where you had earned 2 months off of, 2 years off of that max time, there are occasions where somebody only earns 2 months off of that max prison time. And so then they're only going to receive 2 months worth of vouchers, not 3. We cannot initiate payments after that max prison date because we have to release you anyway at that max date. So from a cost saving standpoint, the Department of Corrections really is not saving any money. So we will pay up to 3 months up to that max date. The vast majority have their earned good time well in advance of that max date, and they can take advantage of the full 3 months. As a matter of fact, I think it's 80%. 80% of those who use the program take advantage of all 3 months.
Great, thanks for making that clarification. Mm-hmm. Stephanie from Olympia asks, do you know what percentage of the participants that take this offer, take the housing voucher, who then move on into homelessness after their 3 months or whatever number of months of vouchers they have expires? Do you know that percentage?
I do not know that percentage. I know there are many who do find their own housing, and this has created a problem for us as well. A large percentage of individuals are not leaving. They somehow, some way, they are finding a way to pay their own rent. When this program initially started back in 2009, we would see this. It was just a flow. The individuals would come out in the 3 months and move on, and we bring people out of prison. And then in the last few years, it kind of came to, it's not a screeching halt, but the offenders just found a way to stay in the housing. And so that created an issue for us in our program because we got people waiting to come out of prison who are past their earned release date and can't come out because the rooms are full. And so it's a good thing. It's a good thing that these individuals have been able to integrate back into society and get a job and keep a roof over their head. I mean, that's something to be applauded. But on the downside, vendors just aren't jumping up and saying, "Hey, we want to house your offenders, especially sex offenders," and so it does kind of create a backlog in our prisons. And I get paid to get people out of prison, and so it's kind of a damn if you do, damn if you don't type situation. But
understood.
Yes.
So we have about 10 minutes left until we bring Carrie on to talk about the recent 100-day challenge. I'm getting some questions from the field that are, so I guess here's what I'd like to do. I'd like to unmute you, Kate Budd. Kate, are you there? Can you hear me?
I can hear you, Jeff. Thank you.
Great. Yeah, so you echoed a question that Michael Parker in Whatcom County posed, which is about the focus on serving unsheltered clients and that these clients would clearly be homeless prevention clients. Kate, what would you like to add to that?
Well, and my question, and I guess I'll give a shout out to Bob, who has been in our community for a long time in Clark County and does amazing work. So Bob, thanks for being here on the call.
Thank you.
My question was, if the focus is on moving away from prevention, how would this serving this particular population fit into diversion? And I'm wondering, you know, if both Bob and Jeff might have an idea of what that would look like.
Oh, you know, I had a conversation with a number of people, Kathy Kennard being one of them, about that very issue. And while it's true that we are encouraging grantees to focus on unsheltered homelessness, we also recognize the benefit of doing very effective targeting for prevention. And that's what I was referring to earlier, when this is a population of clients we know because of their past, and especially if they have not only incarceration and a criminal record, but prior bouts of homelessness too. This population would, I think, score in to targeted prevention, and so they would be eligible. But it's a balance. There's no doubt about that. Bob, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I know. I was in a meeting in Pierce County 2 days ago, and we were addressing the issue of the unsheltered, and then I have a meeting next week in Kitsap County to address the same issue. You know, that is a tough one. You know, the folks that we are dealing with, you know, coming out of prison, I would not categorize them as unsheltered per se. They are going into transitional housing, but it is what happens afterwards is, and those. I mean, those are the ones that we have to identify fairly quickly and seamlessly, those who are potentially going to be unsheltered, so we can collectively capture those individuals. And right now, that's not really happening.
So, Michael Parker in Whatcom County, I've unmuted you. If you are dialed in and want to contribute to this conversation, you're unmuted if you'd like to join in.
Right. Yeah, I think Kate was getting at the exact point that I had is are we, or you know, would our prevention guidelines benefit from maybe kind of looking at through this new lens, and I guess the second question, because I heard some talk about that, Jeff, and thinking that they probably do, and that these people would score in. My second thought, and when I heard the word transitional, it just kind of led me to think, you know, for some permanent supportive housing interventions, we can still house somebody with those if we can document the transitional nature of whatever housing they were in. We're then still left with trying to document whatever homelessness event maybe happened prior to incarceration. Right. So, and maybe this question goes specifically to the program. Is this program, the BEP that's available to them, is it only targeted to people that have been in prison for a long time, i.e., you know, longer than a year?
It is specifically targeted for those who are coming out of prison. Okay. And not those coming out of jail would not qualify. And just to be clear, and I'm kind of a straight shooter here. This program was, when this was initiated, was purely in the purpose of dealing with a financial strain and burden on the state. And that is the bottom line. It was purely a money issue to let's get people out of prison because it's costing us so much. And in all honesty, so we're bringing people out of prison, and to alleviate that issue, but then they're coming out for 3 months, and then what? Ideally, they find employment and or find another place to lay their head. But in some respects, also, if they don't, then have we increased this unsheltered issue?
So it's a question worth asking, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
I don't know that anybody on the phone has a definitive answer. There's a number of ways you can look at that. Definitely, it bears more discussion. I want to. Well, let's see. My colleague Carrie has a question. Does corrections have any other supports that are available to help? Let's see. I'll just read his question. Are there any other supports from corrections to transition away from the voucher and into paying for housing on their own? So, are there other sources of funding for housing support that corrections can offer these?
Other than coming from transitional funding coming from a field administrator, which I had mentioned earlier, I'm not aware of any. You know, there was a time when we all had our agencies had a lot of money, and we had all kinds of programs, and then around 2009, 2010, 2011. Things just started getting slashed left and right, and the only thing that was basically left hanging there was this housing voucher program, because it was actually saving Department of Corrections money in the long run. And again, there is some occasional use with the field administrators funding, but again, that's limited, and that's just on a case-by-case basis. So to answer your question, that'd be a no.
Okay, great. So I want to start to wrap this first half hour of the webinar up. Bob, if you would be willing to send to me this document that you're sharing with us, and I don't know if it's possible, but a list of contacts throughout the state where corrections staff reside that our housing providers could connect with, I can distribute that to the group.
Not a problem. I'll take care of that.
Could you send that to me?
Yes, I sure will.
Good, wonderful. Thank you so much, Bob, for taking the time to spend with us today. You're welcome to stay on for the second half hour if you want to. And now I want to transition this over to Carrie Retlin, our commerce colleague. Carrie, I'm going to make you the presenter. Carrie, we can see your screen. Are you there?
Great. Hi, everyone. Yeah, I'm Carrie Retlin. I'm with Commerce. I was the project manager for the 100-Day Challenge to End Family Homelessness. Coincidentally, though, Bob, and I also am going to be the interim staff for the statewide reentry council, which the governor just signed this last session. It's a new governor-appointed council intended to improve outcomes for people transitioning out of corrections and other state facilities and back into the community. There's 15 governor-appointed members, one of which is a housing representative, and the housing representative on that council is Karen Lee with Pioneer Human Services. They provide transitional housing and a few other types of housing services for people reentering the community, and they work closely with corrections all over the state. So that's another hat I wear, but that's not the hat that you invited me to wear today. So today I wanted to talk about the 100-Day Challenge, which was something that we stole from other states. Other states had done work on veteran homelessness to set goals and make quick progress on reducing or eliminating homelessness in specific populations. Mostly it was done through technical assistance. In our project, so we stole from, especially from states like Connecticut and Virginia, and we worked with the participating counties to set goals and work with their local providers and build teams like that included the community service offices with DSHS, community action agencies, McKinney-Vento liaisons, in order to make progress towards their goals. And specifically, well, the way that we did it in our state, we set up and looked for a contractor who had experience facilitating this sort of change, and we awarded a contract to Kathy Barco of Aspire out of California. Many of you have probably worked with her or seen her present at conferences. She's also worked with some counties in our state and has provided other services and technical assistance in Washington. And then we solicited counties. We sent out a kind of an informal request, just since there was no additional dollars. We sent out a letter of interest to you all in January, and based on that we got responses from counties and awarded the participating counties. We awarded there were no dollars, so we awarded the project to Mason, Thurston, and Cowlitz County. And then they started working intensely with Kathy in February when the kickoff started. Day one was March 1st, so that kickoff was right at the end of February. And after that event, those counties started planning intensely, setting goals, building up their teams, and working for the next 100 days to make progress towards their goals. Here's what the kind of broad goals were and how they did on progress towards those goals. The two big goals, not only was it to reach a functional zero with unsheltered families, it was also to implement lasting system changes. And this chart shows some general or a few examples of progress that was made in those three counties. The other thing that I didn't include in this presentation, but I can provide more background on if people are interested, is work that there were other folks at the state level who were interested in and participated in some of the calls and meetings. We were at the kickoff and the closing events, and also helped provide technical assistance along the way. So that group created its own resource team, and we set goals too. And I'm proud of the work that we did to make progress on those goals. And when we publish the final report, you'll see more details about that as well. And here's some more detail on how each county made progress on serving families. And again, there's more details on this in the final report that we'll publish later this month or early July. As I mentioned earlier, so one of the big goals of the project was lasting systems change. So part of what I think I was really proud of in this experience was the work that counties have done that they'll continue to work on even though the 100-day challenge is over with. So as a result, so in Thurston County, for example, they're going to continue the exchange and involved meetings that were part of the technical assistance that came with their participation in this challenge. Those meetings are weekly check-ins with, again, the CSO, the CAP, maybe a McKinney-Vento liaison, housing providers, the county. Those meetings were an opportunity to talk about how are we doing in making progress towards implementing a change within an existing system or serving a specific family. Those meetings were an opportunity to really check in every week and talk about how are we doing towards, one, implementing those big changes that we're working on, but also making progress towards functional zero for unsheltered families. As I mentioned, we'll have a final report that we'll publish in July. The other thing that I wanted to share with you all today, and hopefully generate some excitement and interest about, is the second phase. There's a lot of enthusiasm about this first phase of this project, so we're interested in doing a second phase specifically for counties east of the mountains. So we're interested in trying to set up a cohort for counties east of the Cascades. So for those of you east of the Cascades, I kind of thought today might be a good time to maybe do a Q&A with hopefully if someone from Thurston Mason or Cowlitz is on the phone, we can get you to ask a couple of questions of me or of them and find out a little bit more about what they learned, what they do differently, and maybe generate some interest in participating or learning more from me as we launch that project in the next 2 months.
Well, as it turns out, Carrie, we do happen to have Tammy from Mason County, and I think we had Gary Hayden from, oh, Gary, it looks like Gary's with us as well. I don't know if they've entered their audio pins, but in a few minutes we can try unmuting them to see if they can offer some commentary on what their experiences were like. And Melissa Taylor from Cowlitz County also writes in to say that Cowlitz also plans to continue the exchange and evolve discussions as part of their system change. I believe, too, that because of this 100-day challenge that Thurston County has decided to implement a landlord liaison. I'm not 100% certain of that, but I think I've heard something to that effect. So yes, that's one of those great pieces of system change that's being adopted. So I want to open this up to the audience. Again, if you've entered your audio pin, you can click your hand raising button on your GoToWebinar dashboard and I'll see that you have a question, or you can type it in. Carrie, can you talk to us from your perspective about some of the challenges that you saw cropping up on a regular basis during the challenge?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's perennial challenges that counties have. Recruiting landlords, I think, is something that all counties talked about, all the 3 counties that participated talked about as a challenge. Generating local support, coordinating, helping bring organizations that may not receive public funds or CHG funds, coordinating with them, especially organizations that provide services to families, in this case, coordinating with them, if oftentimes the community would acknowledge that the Joneses or the Smiths were an unsheltered family, and so however, if the coordinated entry provider, wasn't working well with a potentially non-publicly funded organization, it was hard to make those connections, and I think that that's one of those perennial challenges that like landlord liaisons, it was a tough thing for communities to work on, and I think some progress was made there, but there's still more to do in that arena, and that's a statewide thing, and that's happening all over the country as well.
And that echoes a sentiment that we hear all across the state during this time when vacancy rates are so low. That's a regular refrain that we hear, not just from the 100-day challenge participants, but all across the state. So I'm trying to work out a deal with Tammy. Looks like she's going to dial in so we can unmute her and she'll be able to share her experience. I want to extend that to Gary too. Gary, I'm not sure you were how hands-on you were with that project, but if you want to comment, we'd love to have you dial in. Carrie, what can grantees look for with respect to the Eastern Washington Phase 2 process in the coming months? What can they expect to see coming from Commerce?
What we're interested in putting together kind of a, and we didn't do this the first time around, but Kathy Barco suggested that we have a meeting and that we host a meeting for counties to be able to get together and learn a little bit more about this, someplace central in the eastern part of the state, Moses Lake maybe, or some place like that, so that we could all get together and talk informally about how this went, what we learned, what counties, if counties participated, what they would, what the benefit would be. And maybe we'll even be able to talk somebody into somebody from one of the counties who participated to come out with us when we do that. And that would probably be we'd probably need to do that in August in order to and then we'd look at launching the next phase in late August.
Yeah.
So we're hoping to set up a meeting. We don't have dates on that yet, but as soon as we do, I'll share that through you all, Jeff, and communications that you send to CHG leads.
Great, Carrie. And I see now that Tammy's dialed in. Tammy, I'm going to unmute you, and you should be live now.
Great. Hello, everyone.
Hi. And, I see Carolyn is also on the call.
Oh,
Carolyn,
get her on the phone, yeah.
Yeah, Carolyn, if you want to dial in, I can unmute you. But Tammy, why don't you share with the group your experience with the challenge from your perspective?
Yeah, this was really exciting for us. In Mason County, for those of you that don't know, we are the most rural county in Washington State, and we have one city in the entire county. And so we have and dispersed population centers that are 45 minutes to an hour away from each other. So we have had really a lot of siloing in our service providing, and then we also, like many counties, don't have much for affordable housing. So when we first started this challenge, I'll tell you, and we thought we had just 12 homeless families. I say just 12. Because we were really working from a list that came from Crossroads, from the shelter that Carolyn, and I'll let her talk more about that Carolyn manages. And so when we all came together as service providers, and I'll say having a diverse team was really key, and getting buy-in from folks. I mean, we had interest from our chief of police, we had interest from one of our bank managers, we had a lot of excitement in the community around solving this, which was also great because that brought in additional resources and outside thinking. So not as much groupthink maybe, because we had folks that were outside of the service providing that were pitching in and sharing ideas and thoughts. So we started with 12 homeless families. When the team got together and for the first time actually sat down and looked at their lists and got rid of duplicates, that's when we found out we had 40. So basically all of our service providers had their own list. We didn't have as much duplication as we thought we had. The pit we had in our stomach around how are we going to house 12 families got a lot bigger, because we were, how the heck are we going to work and problem solve and house 40 families in the 100 days that we have? And I'm really going to let Carolyn talk about that, because her team deserves so much credit in how they really made not just system changes, but really a shift in the thinking of the organization and for all of the service providers. So some of the exciting things that happened from county perspective, we saw folks really start to work together, and that has continued. Rolling out coordinated entry, we had not even started yet, and I'm kind of, in a strange way, glad we were the late adopters, because folks at Kitsap, folks at Cowlitz, we were able to meet with and walk through and touch base with folks who've already gone through this, and they were so willing to share what bumps and bruises they got along the way, and also show us where they were. And I think pretty much anybody with coordinated entry will tell you it's always in a process of growth and refinement. And so getting that launched in 100 days was exciting. So for us to end this 100 days with just so much more collaboration, cooperation, energy, great stories all around, such a huge success. Only 5 families that we could not resolve within that 100 days out of the 40 that we found out that we had, was absolutely amazing. So there's a lot to be said for putting a timeline around it and having a good taskmaster like Kathy, actually, Barco, from Aspire. So she was, I think, a real key also to helping keep us all on track and helping us find success.
And I've been having some correspondence with Carolyn. She's having difficulties getting her audio pinned, so it looks like she's not going to be able to address the group.
Oh.
Gary Aiden from Thurston County, are you able to, if I unmute you, are you there, Gary? Doesn't look like he's dialed in. So, so Tammy, talk to us a little bit about what you know about lasting system changes that have been adopted. What do you know about that?
Well, that would be our coordinated entry, so that is our lasting system change. Like I said, we did not have one, and so we literally launched it in 80-some days. And, you know, that's actually been incredibly exciting, and that has been well received by the community. We did a soft launch of it because it's housed right now with Crossroads Housing, where Carolyn's at, and we wanted to just sort of start working out the kinks and getting folks trained and all of that good stuff before you know, launching it broadly. And it's amazing, as you all know, word travels quickly. So the soft launch, really, the word has traveled throughout the community, and that number is getting used. We have we just went through our RFP process for the local dollars here at the county, and so Crossroads did put in a request for funding for coordinated entry so that there's a staff person, but we are also utilizing community jobs, and there are other organizations within the community that are stepping up to help, which is important because, for example, Belfair is, well, with construction right now, about an hour away from Shelton, and so that is a challenge for folks to get a bus and get down to Shelton and back home and, you know, meet with someone and talk with someone. And we have services up there, but in the past we've never combined those services. One of the other things that we did for coordinated entry is really get everybody on board with HMIS. So not, in fact, I would say the only service provider in Mason County that had been using HMIS was Crossroads. And so now everybody's seeing how that tool can be used, and really thanks to Kitsap, because Kitsap really gave us a great overview of how they utilize it and the reporting that they get from it, and how that has worked for them. Everybody is on board with that, and honestly, at the beginning, a lot of folks weren't because they saw it as one more step or possibly double entry, but once they saw the benefit of that, especially with coordinated entry, they got excited and got behind it. So that was pretty great.
That's what we like to hear about data, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Knowing what you know now, Tammy, what would you do different if you had this to do over again from scratch?
You know, I can't really think of anything that I would do different. You know, we kind of, as far as the team coming together, the coordination and everything, I mean, honestly, for me, the only feedback I had on the forum was that we had a lot of other things going on during the 100-day challenge. We had the change in HMIS, so we had training at Commerce, we had the conference in Spokane, and, you know, all of those things don't seem like much until you compare them to 100 days, and then all of a sudden it feels like a pinch and painful, right? Yeah. And so that was the only real feedback I had, was to kind of look at the calendar for the next challenge and make sure that you're giving folks that full 100 days. You know, as far as the team and everything that came together, it really was great. The facilitation was great. The weekly check-ins were great. I didn't have, you know, I can't think, I don't want to say we were perfect in what we did, but I wouldn't change anything. It, you know, it worked out really well for us.
Mike Parker from Whatcom County, I've unmuted you, and I'd be better if you asked your question rather than me reading what you wrote. Are you there, Mike?
Yeah, I am. Can you hear me?
We can.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I participate in a, I think we've changed our name, but another group facilitated by Stephanie Reinauer about vulnerability assessments and coordinated entry. And I was just curious, that's a very fast time to roll out coordinated entry. And I wondered if you employed or are thinking about employing a vulnerability assessment tool, whether that be for, you know, families specifically in this program or just going forward. And if you did, how did it go?
Yeah, we do, and we did, and it's still morphing, and I think that's one of the benefits and why we as a group really decided to keep it at Crossroads Housing originally. You know, A, they volunteered and they had the room, but B, they have the caseworkers that were able to start walking through that process and refining it, and that was painful for them because that was like doing double duty for a while. I mean, Crossroads, I really wish Carolyn could get on the phone. They worked their tails off, and them going through the vulnerability assessment, we really are shifting to doing as much of the assessment on the phone that we can, and making sure that we have the skill set and the talent to do that. So, and there's a process of training, so she could speak more to it, but we are definitely doing that.
Great, thanks.
Carolyn writes this in. She says, I would let other participants, so that might be future participants in phase 2, know to expect that the number of unsheltered homeless will possibly rise dramatically from day 1, which is really a measure of being better at finding people, and to not let that discourage you, or don't let it make the goal seem further out of reach. It's still obtainable as their record can show, actually. She also shares that that's the same with the PIT, and I think we've seen that as over the years as methodologies have improved. Sometimes that makes the numbers goes up just solely from having a better way of finding people. So yeah. I think that's a point well taken.
Yeah, and thanks for bringing that up. I'm glad that came up. This is Carrie. I think build resources, do better work within a finite, there were no additional dollars shared with these counties. It was just technical assistance. I think in the era that we live in, we will continue to have to do more with the same amount or less of resources around the state and in these communities. So that that was a part of the challenge, and something that we acknowledged is as communities get better at communicating, and as we get better at communicating with our grantees at the state level, hopefully we'll get better at finding people who need services and identifying them and implementing things like VI SPDAT. That's something that Cowlitz County did a lot of work on to improve vulnerability assessment and identification. So yeah, so I think that as you do that tough work, sometimes it makes the work feel more daunting, but it also, I think in the long run, like Tammy said, it pays off.
Mm-hmm.
Tammy, do you feel like the work you did in establishing cross-system connections is something also that's going to be lasting into the future?
Oh yeah, absolutely. In fact, everyone is excited, and we've seen, benefits from that too. Just in communication between service teams, we all shared a story at the 100-day celebration, and the great thing, to me, the thing I love most about our story is that it really showed our team coming together. I mean, we had someone who was chronically homeless that couldn't get access to behavioral health resources, that was having a hard time getting other services, and the caseworker that had been working with her was able to reach out to another caseworker that actually deals mostly with homeless youth, but said, you know what, I think I can help you here, and did. And we were able to get that person housed, and here she is. She has a teenage daughter who's in school. She's feeling good about herself. She's very active at the shelter and very supportive at the shelter, and literally changed her life in a way that gives you goosebumps. And so, the lasting change that we made in the system is actually helping in that process, because the communication itself, folks know that they can reach up and reach out for help. And we've seen more of that in the last 100 and some days now, where people know that, whether it's, hey, I've got somebody that can be housed, but we're out of funding here, but they need a camp spot for 3 days, we can do this, does anybody have that? And it's literally from that type of support to reaching out and looking at the tool sets of other folks in the community and saying, how can we help each other to overall tackle the problem and get folks housed?
Yeah, that's great. That's what we want to hear, this cross connections. Carolyn writes in from Crossroads Housing, who, as you said, Tammy, did the bulk of the heavy lifting. We began using the VI SPDAT tool, but found that it was not a good fit for shelter. But using it helped us to realize that what we needed in terms of it helped us realize what we needed in terms of an assessment tool. Be prepared to adapt one tool and then either abandon it or edit it tremendously according to your need, and not to expect to find the perfect tool. I think that echoes other things I've heard, that some people really applaud the VI SPDAT, others say not so much.
Yeah, I think flexibility is key as you start through the process.
Well, and a willingness to experiment. I mean, I think that was kind of part of what was on the table and what Kathy Barco inspired the participants in this particular challenge to do was think outside of their usual parameters of thinking and try to maybe imagine some new ways to tackle old problems.
Yeah, and team resource. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say team resource was amazing as well. I mean, Kathy was definitely creative. She's got great experience, and she was able to, think outside the box and think to other states that she's worked in and provide samples and references and resources. But, Stephanie for us also was absolutely amazing. And so having her available to say, here locally, here's somebody who's done that or been through this and provide us with contacts was also amazing. Or examples or ideas or even just, be a sounding board. So that also made a big difference. I'm really glad you guys had team resource there.
Well, and we continue to be here for you. I know Stephanie is one of your biggest champions, so we're happy to have her here too.
Yeah.
I want to extend one last opportunity for the other attendees to either type in a question or raise their hand on their webinar dashboard, and I can unmute you. Carrie, any parting words from you?
No, I just put up a slide with my contact information as well as contact information for some key folks in each of the counties who were involved. If you want to reach out to them directly and get and ask questions of your peers or of other counties, or if you're interested in potentially learning more. And you are from east of the mountains and you're interested in learning more for the next phase, you can let me or any of these folks know, and hopefully that will help you generate excitement about applying later in August when we share more information about next steps at that phase.
Gary, I'll ask you to send that presentation to me as well so I can send the notes I've taken out to the attendees along with the presentations from both you and Bob. So
sure.
Thanks, Carrie. Thanks, Bob. And thanks, everybody, for taking an hour out of your Thursday. Have a great weekend, and we'll do this again in 1 month, at which time I will be out away. But my colleague Emily Burgess will be hosting and actually leading next month's webinar, where at least most of the time will be spent going over the county report cards that we first announced early in March, and Emily actually has had a lead role in producing those report cards. So she will be conducting this webinar in a month, and as always, you'll get a notice in advance reminding you that the webinar is coming up. So thanks, everybody. Have a great afternoon.
Thanks for DJing, Jeff.
Gotcha.